Retro Warriors episode 444. Woo! As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by viable human being, Chris Saturn.
You kind of trailed up a little bit at the end of that last 4.
It's very upward. It's the beginning of the year. We're trying to have upward inflections.
Yeah, that's a positive
Everything's
year.
upward inflected and good and exciting. As far as housekeeping, this is still our final phoned-in recording session. This is right about the time that life starts to get normal-ish.
This is our final phoned-in recording session of this week.
Of this until the next one.
Right.
It is currently January 5th, so my life is... I'm just now starting to catch up from the holidays, and things are starting to feel more normal. My kid is still on break, so I'm still full-time parenting it. But she goes back to school on Tuesday. By this time next week, my life should be pretty back to the regimented, normal version of my life. Yeah, so that's I'm going to be back on the diet that I sorely need because I gained a bunch of weight over the holidays.
I hear that.
I stood on the scale and audibly went, "Oh my God!" So that
you should have done that little voice and just said, "That's obese."
From the Wii U.
Yeah.
Measuring. My week. I mentioned last episode that I've been playing these MMOs, and they're quite long games.
That's true.
They're.
I think we discussed last episode how much I know that's true.
I'm still going back and forth between Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft. I'm still enjoying both of them in their own unique ways.
Yeah.
It is really kind of interesting to sort of juxtapose these two MMOs because I'm specifically playing World of Warcraft Classic, the Season of Discovery, which is level capped. So the original WoW level cap was 60, and I think it slowly walked up to 120, and then I think they walked it back to something, and I don't know where it is now. But Season of Discovery is seasonal. So for these first few months, the level cap is level 25. And they've reworked a bunch of level 25 content so that instead of being like 5-man dungeons, it's like 10-man raids and stuff. And then they're going to walk out the next season. And the idea is that everyone on the server has the opportunity to basically be in the same places. And I think it's a really fun and cool idea, and it creates more of a community in the server. And it means that everyone in the server is kind of squeezed into these few zones. Because obviously you're not doing level 50 content. I don't even know if it exists. Maybe it does, but I don't know why you would go there because you can't get past level 25. You're capped there. And so it's a really neat idea.
That's neat.
And it is kind of someone, Marlian in our Discord has been very graciously helping me with Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft.
Nice. And
kind of sold it to me as like bite-sized MMO chunks where it's like, hey, this few months I'm going to gain these levels and do this stuff. And then you can kind of chill once you hit your caps. And I like that. It does feel kind of like bite-sized MMO. So I'm level 10 in Season of Discovery, which means I only have 15 levels left before I'm max level. And then I'm just kind of doing the, in air quotes, end game content, which is level 25 content, until they roll out the next section. And I think what's exciting about it is for anyone that's never played an MMO or an MMO expansion on launch, there's something really fun and exciting about everyone logging into the new zone for the new content at the same time, playing together. And this sort of artificially creates that. Where whenever when the next level of content, everyone on the server is going to be in the same zones playing together communally. And I like that. I like that community of it.
I appreciate that.
And they also have added in a lot of abilities. So now you can get class abilities from other classes on your classes using these special objects that they've hidden around the world. So when the new season drops, everyone is searching the overworld for these things to get these new abilities that didn't traditionally. So it's just a really cool idea. And I'm just juxtaposing that with Final Fantasy XIV, which is a very modern MMO. And does very modern
heavily
MMO
inspired
things.
by WoW, though.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the whole genre is, you know. And it's been interesting going back and forth and what each of them does well and what each of them still struggles with and how they compare and contrast to one another. And I think that has been almost as enjoyable to me as playing the individual games is going back and forth. It's like Final Fantasy XIV, great onboarding. It brings you in, it slow rolls everything, but it also does the very JRPG thing of like, here is the linear story at least through the first, I don't know how many dozen hours, 50, 60 levels or whatever.
200 hours.
A few hundred hours,
Yeah.
where it's like, here is the linear JRPG story delivered in microscopic cutscenes that you must go through in this order. And if you skip it, you will be missing huge, important class and game features.
And you have to teleport to this area to get to the next cutscene, but then you have to teleport right back to where you were before to resume.
And on the one hand, I like how every time I log into Final Fantasy 14, it's like, here's your checklist of shit you need to be doing.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But then also logging into Season of Discovery with WoW, there is a linear quest path you can follow, but it feels less restrictive. It doesn't really care what you do and in what order.
Right.
And there's a lot more emergent gameplay. Like I
fair.
spent some time in WoW tonight. I found because I'm playing a priest, so I'm a healer.
Mm-hmm.
And I found this area where there was an elite guy that had spawned.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of my quest line to kill him. So I killed him. But then I noticed tons of people coming through there. And so I just sat there for an hour just helping people fight this guy over and over and healing people as they were, getting the shit beat out of them. Because he's getting killed so fast, and the respawn's on like a 10-second respawn because so many people are there.
Right.
And he spawns with multiple dudes, but if they're not killed one right after another, he will spawn, someone will run up, engage him, and then 3 more guys spawned around him. And so that was like a fun emergent moment of just, this isn't a dungeon, this isn't planned content, this is just me hanging out with people, putting buffs on people, healing them, killing this guy over and over, and then eventually, I had no idea. I killed this guy enough times and I got a rare drop from him, which was another one of these runes, these hidden abilities peppered all over the world for my class. And I was like, that was a really fun, natural, emergent moment of just play and exploration for me. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I go back to Final Fantasy 14 and it's like, here's your very clear, well laid out, ordered checklist of things to do and the order you need to do them in.
That's fair.
And it's just, it's nice. It's nice getting to play both. They both scratch very different itches for me, despite the fact that the gameplay is very much run up to an enemy, cycle these 3 or 4 abilities until enemy is dead, and then run to the next marker on my map. Right.
Yeah. I like the story in Final Fantasy 14, especially in the more recent expansions. But I'll agree. My favorite points are always the emergent gameplay moments when you're just in the real world and you see a random player do a thing and it causes you to do a thing. Then suddenly a whole event happens around you.
Yeah, and granted, I don't mean to imply that like those things don't happen.
Right.
In 14,
Yeah.
But I think sometimes because everyone logged into 14 that I presumably that isn't like max level has their own checklist of shit they're going to do. And some Season of Discovery and WoW is very much like you're kind of finding it. You know what I mean? You're sort of logging in like, maybe I'll go over here. I'm not totally sure.
Right.
And I'm sure someone online has written the perfect, most efficient guide of exactly the order and every step you can possibly take, but that's not really built into the game, so I don't consider it. But I've been having a good time with both games. We are playing, I don't want to say we're playing in the Discord server, but multiple of us are playing the games.
Yeah.
There's been not a lot of us all playing together, but, I think people are getting on board, resubscribing, and there's been a small glut of people resubbing and trying to put something together. So if you either want to play either of these MMOs with us, or are really good at them and want to come tell us how to do it, I don't know that you could tell Saturn how to do Final Fantasy 14. I think he already knows everything. But if you want to come tell me how to do stuff, please
I am not good at the game. I just play it a lot. I can do all the content, but not well.
So absolutely come hang out with us and play MMOs with us because it's been fun. I was kind of reaching a point with World of Warcraft where I was like, maybe it's run its course because I was on the classic server and it was just a little too dated and kind of crusty and curmudgeon-y. It's where all the people that are like, everything after 1.0 was a mistake. Like, this is where they hang out.
Right.
And then retail is awful. I got on retail and I did a bunch of, they have an automatic like dungeon finder. You just hit a button and then you're popped into a dungeon with randoms.
Right, yeah.
And it was terrible. People were just running in opposite directions and shit, and it was insanity. And because Final Fantasy 14 is an MMO where they're like, hey, we've got like 9 expansions worth of shit, but we're not going to give that to you. Up front, you have to go in the front door and slowly walk through out the back door.
Yeah, you have to get through the story quest.
Successive expansion. Yeah.
Unless you want to pay extra to push yourself up to current content.
World of Warcraft is like, hey, here's every expansion's content up front right now. And you're like, okay.
That's one thing I don't like about Final Fantasy XIV, actually, is anytime they release a new expansion, you can't walk to the new areas. You have to go interact with an NPC who will guide you to the new areas. And I assume that's to prevent people from being able to walk there that haven't bought the expansion or whatever. But it's that momentary breaking of the immersion where you have to like just stop and talk to a dude, and then you're in the new zone. And also in all the expansions, they block all of the zones to where you can't get to them until after you have done enough story quests. Whereas in the base game, you can just go everywhere you want.
Yeah.
So
I mean, WoW, like they section off zones and well, although now WoW, like it's kind of like Final Fantasy 14, WoW are the same, where like you buy the thing and you get everything but the newest expansion.
Right.
So it's just really, I guess my point is it's really interesting playing both these games, seeing what they do well, seeing what they don't do, and also weirdly enough, seeing what neither game does that piece of shit Java RuneScape from 2001 does.
Like account management?
Like having decent account management. Like running well on Steam. It's a litany of things that old school RuneScape does well. So it's been really cool. If you want to come play the games with us, please do, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just running around healing dudes. What have you been playing, Saturn?
A lot of stuff. It's my last week of not working, so
cramming it all in, right?
So I went back and tried to play some Judgment again because I had finished Like a Dragon Gaiden and was still kind of feeling that itch where I wanted to play some Yakuza. And so I decided to try Judgment again. And when I first booted it up, I just pulled up my save file and there were some sub-stories to do, and I was having some fun and like really feeling it. Like this is the Yakuza that I enjoy. That's the ridiculousness. It's the random characters. It's exploring Kamurocho, all that stuff. And then I decided to go through the story to unlock some more stuff. And immediately back to back is a investigation scene where I am stuck in first person doing Find the Hidden Picture.
Oh, I see. They cribbed notes from Metroid Other M.
And then immediately after that is a forced stealth mission.
Oh, gross.
And if you get caught, it's a game over.
Oh, no.
And I eventually managed to get to the end of it. But then at the end of the forced stealth mission, you have to take a picture of the guy to use as evidence because you're an investigator or whatever. And if you take a picture at just the wrong angle so that he's not in the picture correctly, or if somebody steps in front of him at the last moment, that's also a game over. And that was just so frustrating that I had to put the game back down. And maybe I'll come back to it someday, but it left a real bad taste in my mouth. So I don't know.
Unfortunate.
Instead, I went to a bunch of indie games and had a lot of fun. So first one I mentioned Void Stranger because it was the one I thought that I was going to like the most, and I did not. It's still a good game. It's basically a pushing block Sokoban style game.
Oh no!
And it seems to imply that there is a deeper story, and I've encountered a couple of cutscenes with JRPG style battles in them. And the whole thing has
it looks like a weird like Game Boy game.
Yeah, it has very charming Game Boy style graphics. And I appreciate that, but it's my issue with it, my complaint that keeps me from really enjoying it is you cannot start over. If you make a mistake, you can't go back and you can't start over. If you exit the game, when you open it, you're right back in the puzzle you were in. The only way to start over is to have Steam wipe your save file.
Oh, geez.
The game itself has no option for that. And there's some things that are missable, and there's some things that I've seen in puzzles that when I tried to interact with them, I didn't know how to interact with them, and instead I ruined it or broke it or destroyed the puzzle. And when I died to start back over, they're not there anymore. They're missed. They're gone forever. And
this is the same team that did Zero Ranger, which was that kind of interesting shmup from a few years ago.
Yeah. So I am concerned about it. I'm told that eventually the game will open up a bit and that maybe I'll be able to go back to some things, but I'm struggling to find information about that because all these websites are like, well, we don't want to ruin the big story twist.
Right.
So we're not going to tell you how all that
yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of hesitant. Like, part of me wants to keep going to see if it does open up, but the other part of me is so upset that I can't fix these mistakes that I've made. One of which was because my controller acted up.
Oh, no.
And that's frustrating that my controller acting up causes me to permanently miss a thing. I prefer games with an undo button is what I'm saying. But otherwise, it like the puzzles themselves are fine. I'm enjoying that part. But next I want to talk about Let's Revolution, because holy crap, this was great. Imagine Advance Wars meets Minesweeper. It's so good. So
I'm with you.
So like, you have an Advance Wars map and you got the Fog of War and everything, right?
Right.
But enemies, if you touch them, if you walk into them, it causes damage to you. So you don't want to walk into them. So they can only appear on the roads or the pathways. And anywhere that isn't a pathway, the tile has a little number on it like Minesweeper to tell you how many pathways are touching that tile.
Oh.
So that you know where to go. And the very first ability that you get is a roundhouse kick that hits all 8 tiles around you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know that you're surrounded by paths, you can just use that, and it'll clear up the Fog of War all around you and hit any enemies in that area. And that was enough to sell me on it. And then it started introducing more abilities and ranged abilities and different types of enemies.
See it described in their Steam description as a roguelite.
It is somewhat roguelite because
I also see the next game described as a roguelike on your list here.
I don't know that I would describe that one as a roguelike.
Every one of these is probably described as a roguelite except for Judgment, which I wouldn't be
Stranger
surprised.
isn't a roguelike. That's a linear progression.
Okay.
Now, the last one I will mention. First of all, Let's Revolution, absolutely play it. It is fantastic. You should definitely get that. The last one is Against the Storm.
I've been looking at this because it looks like SimCity mixed with Warcraft 3.
So
just looking at it.
Here's how I would describe it. It is an RTS somewhere between Warcraft 3 and Age of Empires, but with no combat, which is the greatest thing in the world. I hate RTS combat. I'm so bad at it.
The top Steam review says roguelite.
If it is roguelike, I haven't gotten that far yet. Because so far, I'm still kind of in the tutorial area, because it is a beefy tutorial.
I just like pointing out how useless that descriptor is when it's applied to everything and everywhere all of the time.
Oh, I mean, wouldn't any RTS kind of be roguelike? Because you have to start over every time?
I don't know. Anyway, Against the Storm. I'm excited.
Yes.
I keep almost picking this one up.
So it's on Game Pass. And so I checked it out, and it's really, it's PC Game Pass, not on an Xbox. Mm-hmm. And so it's basically an RTS where did you play Frostpunk?
Yes.
So you remember how in Frostpunk you had to keep the fire going to keep your society alive?
Right. And then every season they'd be like, do we want to eat more babies or kill all the dogs? And you're like, oh my God.
This is like fantasy Frostpunk but less bleak.
Okay.
Mixed with an RTS. I guess that was already kind of RTS. You'll build your little RTS buildings and everything, and you'll build like a logging place, and you'll build a harvesting and whatever, and you have these different residents that'll be in your town. And so far I've unlocked 3 races. I'm told there's a 4th race. I've got humans, what I thought was dwarves, and then it turns out they're beavers.
Oh,
and then the 3rd race is lizard men.
I'm excited by all of this.
Right? And they all have their own little talents and abilities. Like humans are better at harvesting and farming, and beavers are better at logging and engineering, and lizard men are better at tending the fire and killing things. And the big impetus, the stressor in the game is you were appointed to this area by the queen, and the queen gets angry quickly. If you don't do what she wants you to do, she'll like shut down your whole operation and disband your town. So you have to you get these demands by her, orders from the queen of things you have to do, basically just to progress your town and keep your people happy. And at the bottom of the screen is this queen's patience gauge.
Mm-hmm.
And if it goes all the way up, you lose. But if you do good things, it'll go down a little bit. So it's balancing both your time as well as the happiness of your people and the Queen's missions. It's very good. Really enjoying it. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you already have Game Pass. You should check out the PC version, but it's also on Steam, I believe.
I do and may.
Yeah. And I was reading the Steam version now has Steam Deck support. It supports gamepads only on Steam Deck. It does not support any other gamepad.
Yeah, it is Steam Deck verified. I'm guessing they pushed specifically just for that to get Steam Deck sales.
I was reading the notes on that update. They were saying that it still won't work on any other gamepads on PC, but if you are using a Steam Deck, it goes into a specific Steam Deck mode to support those inputs.
Interesting. Well, as soon as I find time between the 2 MMOs I'm actively playing and the Trails game I'm still playing.
Oh, yeah. So you got plenty of time, is what you're saying.
Between World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, and Trails in the Sky, I'm sure I can find time.
But yeah, definitely Let's Revolution and Against the Storm, both highly recommended games. Excellent, worth checking out.
Let's do some news.
Okay.
Prototypes of PS2 Vector Man game have leaked online, as well as early prototypes of Sonic Heroes for PS2 and 68 prototypes of Rayman 2 for GBA.
Of all the games out there that would have had 68 prototypes of it,
it seems excessive, right?
I don't know that I would have ever come up with Rayman 2 if somebody tasked me to guess which game had 68 prototypes.
Especially a GBA port.
Right?
Of Rayman 2.
That's so
I think
weird.
that'd be pretty cut and dry. They'd be like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by PS2 Vector Man.
Yeah, me too. That looks really neat.
I remember Vector Man being one of those games I was like, I think this game sucks. But I can see the idea.
Yeah.
I get what they're going for. There's some merit here, but the game itself is not good. Miyamoto says he has no plans on retiring and that he became a producer because he, quote, couldn't do anything. What does that mean?
He was too busy estimating the size of a chair.
I don't... Whatever, dude. Whatever, man. Good for you.
Just such a weird individual.
Yeah, I suspect that Miyamoto is going to be one of those people that, like, 10 years after he dies, we're going to get an amazing biography. Because we really just don't fucking know much anything about the guy, and that's on purpose.
I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get, like, 5 conflicting biographies.
That wouldn't shock me either. I just feel like this information, like, we really know almost nothing about him, and Nintendo has kept details about him specifically quiet because I think we talked about it, but the famous reason is that his ideas come from weird places. So if you know anything he has going on in his life, you might be able to guess at whatever they're working on next.
Right.
I don't know that I buy that as much as he's probably just kind of a private person, and he seems like a really weird guy.
Yeah, kind of eccentric.
And also Nintendo, because he's kind of, one of the Nintendo celebrities. Right. They probably just don't want anyone to hear any of the old dude opinions he probably inevitably has.
What?
So they're just like, no, just keep him over here with his measuring tape. Don't ask him what he's doing. Leave him alone. Like, so we end up hearing virtually nothing about the man.
We just hear about his banjo.
We get weird anecdotes from time to time, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for the weird Miyamoto biography that comes out years from now.
Seriously.
It's going to be nuts. Billy Mitchell caught lying under oath about Donkey Kong.
That guy.
Shocking. I'm shocked that professional liar Billy Mitchell would lie about something like Donkey Kong.
Did you watch the footage of his deposition that he lied on?
I can't watch him anymore because it's now
my God.
I feel so sad now. He's so depressing.
What's great about it is his lawyer is sitting there, and his lawyer keeps having to interject with, "Don't answer. Don't. If you don't know the answer, don't say it. Don't answer. You don't know don't answer that question.
What even is the current lawsuit?
Right.
Is it still Twin Galaxies?
Yeah, it's Twin Galaxies suing him for misrepresenting something. I
thought he was suing Twin Galaxies.
Maybe, I don't remember, but
oh my God.
I think it's a countersuit or something. But anyway, but just the whole time it's his lawyer sitting there like, he doesn't know that. Stop answering that. Stop speculating. You don't know the answer to that. It's so good. It's so
Billy
great.
Mitchell thinks he's Tim Sweeney, I think, is who he thinks he is.
Right.
Because Tim Sweeney, also an annoying asshole, but has the weight to throw around.
Right.
Billy Mitchell does not. Heir to a hot sauce empire that was real good at Donkey Kong. I'm sorry, Billy Mitchell. You cannot push the legal system around.
I recently watched the multi-hour documentaries on YouTube about both Billy Mitchell and Tommy Tallarico.
Oh, me too.
And
I didn't watch Billy Mitchell, but I watched the Tommy Tallarico one, the H-Bomber guy one.
Yeah. And there's another one too. There's one that Slopes Game Room did that was kind of a follow-up to that. And man, the overlap between the two of them and just the random things that they seem to uncontrollably lie about is it's depressing. I kind of feel bad for them.
It would be a lot less frustrating if this was not an industry and a space where it's so easy to completely sandbag people and railroad them and push them out of the spotlight.
Yeah.
For basically video game fame, which is to say not actually fame at all.
It's just the weirdest thing.
It just feels like ants fighting over an anthill some days.
His mother is very proud.
New fan translation of Symphony of the Night for Saturn actually fixes things.
Oh man, I'm so excited about this. I only barely started it, but I made sure that it got further than the old translation did, because the old translation kept locking up as soon as I would pick up the first item. And this one doesn't. They implemented the PSP's voice acting and its script. And they also improved the load times on a lot of things. So I am very excited about this.
Yeah. I remember I went looking for a fan translation of Symphony of the Night on Saturn because I didn't want to play it on PlayStation for some reason. I think it's just because I had just gotten a Saturn. And I was disappointed to learn that kind of there really wasn't
at the time
a functioning one.
No.
And now there is.
Yeah.
A ground-up rebuild of Daggerfall. This is Daggerfall Unity, I believe. Is now completed. It's considered complete. It's been available to download and play for a while now. I think now they're finally in official we have done it is done.
And now they're at the 1.0 maintenance.
Yeah,
mode.
The 1.0 release, and it is an extremely impressive effort for a game that I just don't want to play.
Yeah, this is going to sound weird for me, but Daggerfall is the only game in that series that I've played for more than a couple of hours.
Oh.
Yeah.
It is. I find the game so brutally difficult, I just can't get anywhere in it.
I've still got my disc from back in the day, too.
But extremely impressive effort.
Yeah. And now Daggerfall is free from Bethesda's website, so you can just download the real version and then add in this
slap it in Unity
mod.
An old obscure Zelda manga was fan translated. This was Legend of Zelda Path of Riruto. Has been fan translated and released in fresh scans, and it's now available. And it looks weird.
It does look really weird.
It looks very weird and is from that strange time. It also looks very Toriyama-esque.
What?
I know. I'm also shocked. Apparently, he's relatively influential in the space, but very Toriyama-esque looking.
If I want to see a Zelda comic manga-like thing, I'm just going to go back and read that Link to the Past adaptation.
That is a really good one. I like that one.
I love that one.
I like that one. Square Enix's president says they will be aggressive in applying AI to games development because that's what we all fucking wanted, right? We all asked for that to be a thing.
Because Square Enix just can't have a take that isn't just shit.
Now, to be fair, some of because when they say they're going to be aggressive, there are claims that they make. These aren't unsubstantiated claims, but I say claims because I don't know that we know the details of it. But they used AI to improve the facial modeling in Final Fantasy VII, and
a lot of textures and background.
Images stuff like that. Yes, I am okay with that kind of AI.
It's going to save time for a lot of the actual staff.
I suspect that's not what he meant.
Yeah, my fear is that what he means is we will need to pay less human beings in the future.
Yeah. A 13-year-old kid reached an NES Tetris kill screen in 38 minutes.
Yeah.
which is the fastest that any human being has done it. I'm assuming
Right.
there have been like tool assisted and computer runs that have done it. 13-year-old kid in Oklahoma. So good on that kid.
Right.
I can't even fucking imagine doing something that impressive when I was 13. I was mostly just not impressive when I was 13. Anyway, the kid's name is Willis Gibson.
Right.
So good on Willis Gibson for beating Tetris in 38 minutes.
Seriously.
I've been playing it for 35 years. Haven't gotten anywhere close. So
when I was
kudos to
13,
you.
I thought it was really impressive when somebody reached level 7.
Yes. Xbox bans players for uploading game captures of Baldur's Gate 3, presumably because they include fucking a bear. I don't know.
Yeah, it was those scenes. And people had hit the share button on their Xbox controller, the big button in the center of the controller.
Right.
And it auto uploaded to Xbox Network because the players had that setting set, and then Xbox banned them. And
there's been a weird glut of recent Microsoft kind of auto bannings.
Yes.
That I've been seeing people complain about.
And
so that's
Larian has said that they are already speaking with Microsoft to get these reversed for their players, and to address this situation as to why Microsoft allows these things to be uploaded if they are going to result in an instant ban.
I don't. It's fucking dumb,
right?
And Video Game History Foundation found and preserved a prototype of Sony's canceled localization of Super Pinball for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
And did you see what Sony was going to call it when they had announced it for the NES?
No, I did not.
They were going to call it Super Sushi Pinball. No one knows why. There's no sushi.
Why? There's not a sushi table? Like,
no, it's just a Japanese developed pinball game, and so Sony thought that would be a perfectly reasonable name for it. I don't know what was going on at Sony in the 80s.
Cool, I guess. I guess.
And VGHF showed some of the documents that Sony had shown at trade shows at the time, showing off the game, and like all the games in this presentation were canceled except for Super Dodgeball.
Yeah.
Like, of all of the games that Sony had announced for the NES, that was the one in this set that actually made it to market.
Yeah, and it's all available on Hidden Palace already.
Yes,
so if you want to go check out Super Sushi Pinball.
Yeah.
As it is, for some reason, calling itself.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the topic at hand, which is Lemmings.
Yes.
Which is a Rockstar North production, according to our synopsis. This was developed by DMA Design, known now as Rockstar North. It was published by Psygnosis, later known as Soda Computer Entertainment Liverpool. It was published on the Amiga in February 1991. It came out on tons of other PC platforms.
Yes.
DOS, Mac, Atari ST, ZX Spectrum, Acorn Archimedes, NEC PC98, FM Towns X, 68000, Amstrad CPC, and C64.
Yes.
It also came out on PC Engine CD, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Gear, Master System, NES, 3DO, Lynx, Game Boy, CDI, Amiga, CD32, PSP, PS2, and PS3.
It's one of the most ported games of all time. And up there
that was my tryout as the Micro Machines guy. You think
you're not even close, sir. And I was trying to find if there was a list of the most ported games so I could see if it was still up there.
It's got to be up there.
And I found a article from the most illustrious gaming source, Game Informer, where they listed the most ported games of all time. And it didn't even make their list, but several of the games that were on their list only had like 4 ports.
So it beats them by a lot.
So no, those clearly have more.
If you include unofficial ports, it's Doom. It's got to be Doom.
Yeah, got to be Doom or Tetris.
I had Doom on my TomTom. I remember I installed it and I was like, why did I do this?
Yeah, I had Doom on my N-Gage.
So what's funny is when you go to the Lemmings video game Wikipedia, it says platforms, Amiga, period. That is all it says.
That's the one. Well, that was the first one. That's what it was originally designed for.
Not acknowledge any other versions of the game.
Amiga and friends.
As far as first encounters, my first encounter was, let's see, today's Friday. It was... It was Wednesday.
Can you rank it in hours?
Yeah, it was about 57 hours ago.
Nice.
Lemmings is one of those things. This is there's this little area in my head, in its little roped off zone called Saturn games, and it's weird little game franchises that Saturn is weirdly excited about, and I don't know anything about them. Included in the weird little games franchise is the Lolo games.
Yeah, yeah.
Most of the Bubble Bobbles.
Right, yeah.
Just these kind of weird. They're weird Saturn games in my head. They're games that I never played growing up. Nobody I knew ever played them growing up. I knew of them because they're pretty notable franchises, and maybe specifically like Bubble Bobble and Lemmings. And I did play the first Bubble Bobble, but I had no idea there was a franchise and that they turned into little boys. I didn't know all these things.
Yeah, you were a little young for all of these things, I guess.
Lemmings was it's in that little roped off special zone in my head of Saturn games that one day I'll play. And so the day was Wednesday, and I played Lemmings, and I played it for a little bit, and I was like, this is a pretty cute little puzzle game. And that was, that was it.
That's weird because it was such a massive, influential hit at the time. Yeah. And to hear it boiled down to cute little puzzle game kind of feels sad.
It is I guess just giving first impressions. I was playing it and I was like, this seems like it would have been a really cool thing to goof off with when I was like 10.
Right.
That was kind of my assessment.
If I had to give a comparable game as far as impact on the industry and stuff like that, I would say that the release of Lemmings at the time would have been similar to the release of The Sims as far as broad appeal and impact.
I could see that also as far as just like, it feels almost like this sort of sandbox for playing around in.
Yeah.
I could very much see a Sims comparison for sure.
Especially when you get to the level designer and the multiplayer mode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, definitely, again, like if this was a thing that I found when I was like in that 10 to 13 range in a summer, I would have played the shit out of it.
Right.
Now I'm just like, yeah, I get it. It's cute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that Mario Paint effect where when you're 9, you'll spend 1,000 hours in it. When you're 35, you're like, yes, I can do stamps. Goodbye. Like there's...
So you say that, but I was reading an interview. Who was it? It was some famous author of the time was saying that they had to destroy their Lemmings disc because it was distracting them from completing whatever novel they were working on at the time.
Man,
but
it definitely feels like I think of them more as platform video games, where it's like it's less a game you play through and more of a platform for creativity.
Now, there's also just the puzzle aspect of it. So there are people who just want to finish the puzzles in the same way that they just want to finish the crossword puzzle every
or they
Sunday
sit down, they play The Sims, and they play until they're basically like off and running and making enough money that they never have to worry about anything, upgrade all the stuff in their house, and go, cool, I did it, I won The Sims, goodbye. Like that's... or you smash all the flies in Mario Paint, and then, or you turn all of the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star stars into pigs, and you play it once, and you laugh until you pee your pants, and then you go, I beat it. I beat Mario Paint. I don't know who would do that. Well, what's your first encounters with not Mario Paint, Lemmings, Saturn? Tell me about Lemmings.
I didn't have a great PC at the time, so it wasn't until the console ports came around that I got a chance to play it, and I played the Super NES version, and I had no idea what the fuck it was. We just rented it because it was one of the earliest games on Super NES when we had a Super NES, and we got it home, and I was expecting a platformer, because the box art is just cute animal looking things.
At the time, mascot platformers were
hot everywhere. And instead, it was this weird puzzle game that ran in real time, and it had the sounds of adorable creatures dying over and over again. So definitely got my attention at that age. I absolutely love it.
Nice. Tell me about the development, because this is one of those episodes where we're probably going to spend more time talking about the development than the game part of the game.
Well, fortunately, it's very well documented. There's 2 books written about the development of Lemmings.
Oh my God.
And also Mike, I don't know if it's pronounced Daly or Diley because it has 2 L's, but he was one of the guys at DMA Design, and he kept a website where he chronicled his involvement in the development of it. So and that website's down, but you can find it on Internet Archive. So anyway, It started in August of '89. DMA Design was working on a shmup, a scrolling shooter that was called Walker. It was a follow-up to a prior game that they had released.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought in this freelance graphic designer, Scott Johnson, to help them out. And one of his tasks was to create little characters for the Walker to shoot at. And he made these little 16 by 16 sprites for the characters that it would shoot. And before they left for lunch that day, Mike Daly thought that they could be done as 8x8 sprites. And nobody else on the team thought that they could make something that looked like a person in 8x8. That was just too small. And so he stuck around during their lunch break and made a row of 8x8 men walking into a gun and getting crushed by a 10-ton weight on a conveyor belt on somebody's Amiga. And when everybody came back from lunch, they thought it was hilarious, and they just kept adding more shit to kill these little people into this image. And then they were all just laughing at the little men dying. And that the image, there's a GIF of it on his website that you can find that shows all these different ways of them dying. And one of the guys at DMA, Russell Kay, said he thought there was a game in this, and he and Dave Jones, who was the founder of DMA, were trying to implement missiles into their game Walker that would act like the missiles. He said specifically salamander style missiles. I presume he means Gradius style as well, the kind that just track along the ground.
Right.
And so they took those little people from the animation and made a example of them just tracking along the ground and walking around, and just to prove that it was possible. And that was where they were like, oh no, this is what needs to start happening. And they started calling it Lemmings and decided this has to be a game. And side note, they never actually implemented those missiles into that game. They just did regular ass missiles. So they put in all that effort. And anyway, so they did make some demos. They showed it to a few different publishers, and finally Psygnosis decided to agree to work with them in late '89. And the reason why the Lemmings have green hair and blue outfits is because that was the best color that they could choose that would still show up correctly on a CGA graphics card on an IBM PC.
Right.
That's literally the only reason they chose those colors. And they did mention that several of the animations in the game were just because they really enjoyed watching them die, which I think is...
And presumably Lemmings because of the myth that Lemmings...
Right. Yeah. The Disney myth.
Mass suicide. Yeah, the white wilderness myth.
Right, yeah.
Although there are many myths about Lemmings, because I did do some reading about the animal Lemmings. Because I don't know why I did that instead of actual show research. But I was reading that a Bavarian geographer proposed that they fell out of the sky during rainstorms and then died when the grass grew in the spring.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
There was a follow-up by a guy named Ole Worm who said, yeah, they definitely fall out of the sky, but they get brought over through the wind. And they don't just spontaneously generate. And in old, because I do know some history about, basically, they used to make these tomes about animals, right?
Yeah.
These like biological tomes, but
Right.
the people doing them would just make shit up.
Yeah.
So they would say things like hedgehogs have spikes because they use them to pick up fruit.
Yeah.
And there was this whole thing of like animals spontaneously springing out of nature.
Yeah, that's where they come from.
And it was not an uncommon thing.
Well, they come from the four elements. From
the
fire
mass suicide myth was propagated by Disney.
Yep.
And the truth of it is that they will sometimes try to migrate across large bodies of water, and if they can't make it, they'll die in the process. But anyway, I just want to talk about Lemmings for a minute.
The creatures in the game, if they get in the water, they just die instantly.
Yeah. Well, they obviously they're already worn out. So their migratory pattern it's already at its peak.
Spent too much time mining.
Yeah, that's it.
So
they do have little pickaxes, though. So that is factual.
That does make the mining faster.
That's a true thing.
So anyway. they did mention that that the level editor that is bundled into the game was made before most of the game was made, and it was the one that was actually used by the team because it looked like the graphics program they were used to using on Amiga.
Which I saw the name of. I forget what it was called. It was Deluxe Paint.
Yeah, Deluxe Paint. Yeah, thank you.
Deluxe Paint was the one.
Yeah. And they basically just did that so that everybody on the team could quickly make levels. And their primary objective when they were making levels was either to stump each other or make each other laugh. And they would then send the levels by mail over to Psygnosis for review. And sometimes they would get a fax back with just notes like fix this or whatever. And often those notes would be just covered in all these scribbles and profanities because of how hard the levels were.
Yeah.
After they had made a bunch of the levels, they realized that they were just making levels to stump each other, and there were no actually easy levels to teach anyone how to play the game.
Yeah.
So they just modified their very difficult levels into tutorial levels, which is why you'll see many of the maps reused throughout the game, because there's the regular version that they made first, and then the easy baby version for people like me who start on the easy mode.
Right. And me.
Yeah.
I was playing Neo Lemmings.
Yeah.
And whenever I would get to a hard level, I would skip it.
That was not an option back in the day. You could not skip the levels. So they did make a split screen multiplayer mode. Originally, they were talking about adding null modem support so that you could just dial up against another Amiga player and play multiplayer. But then somebody realized that the Amiga could support multiple mice. You just plug 2 mice in there and have them each independently control a cursor. And so they just decided to do split screen multiplayer for the game. And it's just split right down the center of the screen vertically. So you have the left and the right side are different players. And the split screen is ridiculous to play.
It sounds ridiculous.
It's nonsense. And they realized that the Atari ST couldn't use 2 mice, but it could use a mouse and a joystick, so they could keep the multiplayer there. But most of the other PC versions lost the multiplayer, but it is on the console.
Yeah.
And then the soundtrack for the game was composed by Brian Johnston, who was part of DMA Design at this point. And he was the brother of the artist Scott Johnston, I believe, if I put it in the notes right anyway. And he had sampled and straight up plagiarized a lot of copyrighted music.
Oh, you don't say.
Which happened in PC games of the era.
Sure.
But he did a lot. Yeah. And Psygnosis heard this and thought, maybe the Beatles wouldn't be okay with this among all of these other artists. You can actually find all of his illegally copyrighted music remixes on the cutting room floor for Lemmings. Yeah. You can find all of the original MIDIs. So they had their in-house composer at Psygnosis, Tim Wright, replace all of those tracks with public domain music. And his remixes of these random public domain songs are all just super charming and catchy.
Also, public domain music showed up a lot in PC games in this kind of
also true,
era. So it feels very appropriate.
Yeah,
I think.
There was an arcade version in production at Data East. Psygnosis and DMA had licensed it to Data East, and several staff members from DMA were traveling to Data East in Japan to help with the programming of it. And they saw that the guys at Data East had incorporated a fast forward option to allow you to speed through, so you wouldn't just have to slowly watch the Lemmings walk across the screen.
Right, and, especially after you've basically solved it.
Right. And so they were like, oh, this is brilliant. We have to adapt this to every future version of the game. And then the arcade version was canceled and it never actually released. But they did get a good idea out of it. And only 11 people from DMA Design worked on the original Lemmings, including the voice of the Lemmings, which was provided by artist Scott Johnston's mother.
Do you think... Because I always wonder when people bring in like their moms or whatever to do shit like, do you think she even fucking has any idea?
I imagine eventually she learned, because it became like huge for a little while there, especially in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. I just am always, because sometimes you hear about that and then people reach out and they're like, what? That thing I did 30 years ago?
I just want to know if like other people in Scotland like see that woman in the grocery store and are like, I'll do the Lemming voice.
It's
Say,
the
"Oh,
Lemmings
no."
lady. Why did they call me that? Let's talk presentation.
Yes.
Because it's an older game and it's pretty simply drawn,
And we don't talk
you know,
about old games on the show very often.
I know these old blocky games. I played the Neo Lemmings port, which, as far as I can tell, is slightly nicer looking, but still very much
It utilizes
using
the original
the same
graphics.
iconic design. Yeah. And so even having never played Lemmings, I can still see Lemmings and identify Lemmings.
Yes.
If only because of the Lemmings themselves and their blue shirts and their green hair. And I can look at that and go, oh, that's Lemmings.
And what was really impressive about it at the time when it first released was not only how tiny they are, which I don't think they stuck with the 8x8. I think they ended up going with 8x16 or 8x10 or something. But the fact that their movement is so fluid, because there's a lot of
well animated.
There's a lot of frames of their little feet and arms moving as they walk, and their head bobs up and down, which, you know, today is a very simple thing, but at that era on a PC was pretty impressive to consistently, especially with how many of them were on screen at once, was very impressive.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's I hesitate to be like, oh, it's a really good looking game.
Right.
But it's very impressive for what it did and is very iconic for sure.
And a lot of the backgrounds are pretty good looking for their time.
True.
But you know, they're gonna look like Amiga Paint graphics,
old Amiga
by today's
game
standards. Yeah.
We already touched on the music, but it's a lot of public domain remixes.
Yes, it was very catchy.
And I think it's all done well. I think it's a very well presented and has there's a lot of personality in it.
A lot of charm.
A lot of old PC games, old Amiga games, stuff like that can feel really kind of generic in a way.
A lot of the PC, especially European developed PC games of that era, have a very specific vibe to them.
Yeah,
where when you see a lot of these games, you're like, oh, I believe that was originally a European PC game of the early 90s.
The same way that like a lot of DOS games have that very, this is a very DOS game feel.
Yes.
I think Lemmings definitely differentiates itself from the pack.
I would agree with that. Yeah,
which is very nice.
Yeah, which I think also helped with its universal appeal, because it sold very well in every region, not just in Europe, just on Amiga, but on multiple platforms and multiple regions. So I think that did help with its appeal.
Let's talk gameplay.
Yeah.
And I played some Lemmings. On Wednesday, and it was one of those games where at first I was like, "This is it. This is the whole fucking game," because they don't. So the whole conceit is, the Lemmings come in to frame. You have to save a specified number of them for the level that's level dependent.
Yeah.
And you have to get them to a goalpost.
Right.
And they just come in and they walk to the right.
Yeah.
And you can upgrade Lemmings to different types of Lemmings that will do things like dig or bash a wall
jobs,
or create a little upward sloping platform.
Yeah.
All sorts of different stuff.
Yeah.
And they begin introducing them one at a time and increasing the complexity bit by bit by bit.
Yeah.
Until you start reaching levels and you have so many different types of Lemmings that it goes from being a puzzle game where you are solving it to a puzzle game where there is no real prescribed solution. You are inventing one.
Yes. You were given tools. They can probably solve the problem. You just have to figure out how you want to use those tools.
And I think that's the beautiful moment that Lemmings can create, is because that there is emergent gameplay.
Right.
It's not the designer probably was like, oh, they should probably solve it this way.
Right.
But once you've got enough different types of Lemmings, and I will say a complaint I had about the gameplay is I would forget what some of the Lemmings did. And so there would be so many Lemmings that I'd be like, oh shit, what does this one do? And what does this one do? But I think there's like eight.
There's 8 jobs in the original game. Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where the designer surely had a solution in mind.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely nothing to say you need to know their solution or ever find it out. You can very much create your own solutions here.
When you get to the higher difficulties, especially when you get to the expansion pack's highest difficulty, which is basically impossible by humans, you get to a lot of levels where not only is there a specific way you have to do it, but the specific way involves what some people considered cheats in the main game.
Oh, I see.
Like how to break your blocker out of blocking by digging 1 pixel underneath his foot and then stopping your digger from digging so that they both walk off.
It sounds like there's a curve here to the appeal of the gameplay.
Yeah, there's a steep difficulty curve the further you get. It gets pretty extreme difficulty by the time you get to the end.
Because I was really enjoying it where I was at kind of the mid-tier levels of like, hey, I can really sort of play with this and come up with my own solution.
That's where I enjoy it most.
I think I would enjoy it a lot less in those hardcore modes where it's like, no, there is one correct solution and it is hyper-specific.
Well, sometimes there's more than one solution, but they all involve very difficult maneuvers, and usually the time is much more tight in those levels too. So you're limited in how much time you have to even think of these things.
Yeah. I do like that. Surely this is one of the first things that the difficulty removes. But I enjoy that, at least in the early levels, you do not have to save every lemming. And in fact, depending on the level and the solution, you cannot save every lemming.
Correct,
a lot of the time. Because one thing I learned is that when you change a lemming, that's it. That's what they are now.
Not necessarily.
Can you change them again?
Some of them can take multiple jobs. Like you can have a climber that is also a floater that then becomes a builder. But once they are a blocker or an exploder, they're kind of stuck.
The blockers, because it is my inclination to use blockers to direct them. Like that's kind of my default, because in your head you're like, I want them to go that way. The easiest way to achieve that is with a blocker.
Right, correct.
But a blocker is a blocker for forever,
unless you dig 1 pixel under his foot. Then
and he's no longer a blocker.
Yeah, then he just starts walking again. Yeah, in the classic game, the way to get somebody out of being a blocker was to turn them into an exploder or to just use your nuclear bomb.
Yeah, which then you still lose the lemming in that.
Right, you still lose that lemming. Correct. But you get nice particle effects.
It's probably worth quickly going through the different types of lemmings that we have.
Yeah, your jobs.
If you want to fire through those.
Yeah. So you get your climber, which can climb up walls. However, if he climbs all the way up a wall and then falls, he will die.
Yes.
So you also have floaters who can use a little teeny tiny parasol to float down from tall drops, which you want to make your climber also a floater just in case. You've got your exploders who will count to 5 and then they will explode, except for in Neo Lemmings where they took away the timer and just make them immediately blow up. And some other fan ports will also take away the timer. But in the traditional game, they count to 5, which is especially difficult in some levels where you have to get them to blow up a specific place.
Right.
And you have to figure out where the timer starts and ends and where you should hit the button so that they walk over there and then blow up. So usually you would just turn them into a blocker first and then make them blow up.
Yeah.
So you got the blockers, which will just stand there and force any lemmings that reach them to turn around. You've got the builders that build a little ramp of 12 steps at an angle so that they can reach other platforms. You got the bashers, which will tunnel forward through any soft wall that they can get through. You got the miners that dig diagonally down through rocks. And you got the diggers that dig straight down through rocks to reach any platform below them.
The one I struggled the most with was probably the builder and the miner, because they go at angles.
Yeah, they definitely both have learning curves. I would say the builder has the steepest learning curve.
Yeah, because it especially when you're needing to chain ramps.
Yep.
It gets real tricky real fast. And what I found interesting about the game was, so, depending on the solution I came up with, some of them just required quick mouse work.
Yeah.
Other ones you could plan the whole heist up front.
Right.
And just kind of chain the correct sequence of lemmings and then watch your plan unfold, which is obviously the more satisfying of the two.
And a common strategy, at least until you get to the higher difficulty levels that a lot of people do, is they'll let a couple of lemmings go off and then immediately put a blocker to keep everybody else stuck at the beginning. And then they'll let those two build the entire path to the exit. And then they'll blow up the blocker and let everybody move on.
Oh, that's very smart. So you get time to really plan things.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's some mid-level lemming strategy tips for you here.
I didn't read anything about how to play the game before.
Oh, okay.
I just literally jumped into Lemmings, and I was confused as to what the nuclear explosion button does.
Yeah.
And it just makes them all nuclear explode. All your lemmings just pop like little balloons of guts.
The reason for that is there are some levels where you have a very limited number of jobs that you can assign to them. And if you don't have any more exploders, but you do have like 7 blockers on your map, the level won't end until the timer runs out.
Yeah.
But you can use your little nuclear bomb to make them all immediately blow up and end the level.
And that's kind of it.
Yeah, you got some options for like drop rate and stuff, but
sure,
that's basically it. There are in the main game you can have 100 lemmings active in a level. But some of the ports couldn't handle that, and the saddest one is the Game Boy Color that can only ever have 10 lemmings per level. I was
about to say, how bad is the Game Boy?
The regular Game Boy port can handle 20 lemmings.
But the Color just couldn't.
Or sorry, 14 on Game Boy, but the Game Boy Color could only do 10.
Oof.
And that really changes a lot of the levels a lot.
Yeah. For sure, because now all of a sudden every single lemming is precious at basically all difficulties.
Yes.
Like, unless you just got to save one, which that's,
Well, they did adjust the goals accordingly on some of the levels. So, yeah. There are the 4 difficulty levels. You got Fun, Tricky, Taxing, and Mayhem, which determine what level set you're going to get. Now, Neolemmix doesn't come with the standard levels. It comes with select levels from throughout the series.
Okay.
But you can download and import the standard level set into it. The Super NES port added some extra levels. The Genesis port adds 2 whole new difficulty modes, each with 30 more stages.
Oh, wow.
But the base game is 120 levels. The Genesis game is 180 levels. There is one infamous level from when the game came out that's called All the Sixes. And you have 66 lemmings, and you have 66 of each job. You have to save 66% of them at a 66% drop rate.
And we didn't mention that each job assignment has a limitation.
Right, yeah.
So you can only make so many parachute lemmings, so many blockers, so many bashers, etc.
And what made the level infamous is the level is laid out like the number 666. And so when the game was ported to consoles, Nintendo had raised an objection about that.
Oh, God.
So they had to change that level to just some random text. But it still has all the
everything
stats
else
set to 66. Yeah. And I was reading Mike Daly said about that level that originally he wanted to set it to all 5s, but he couldn't figure out what number to set it at to get 55% saved of 55 lemmings. But it was really easy to do 66% of 66 lemmings.
Yeah.
So he just changed everything to 6s.
The least satanic reason.
But also the multiplayer mode. So let me real briefly mention multiplayer.
Sure.
So there is you got the split screen down the middle, and both players control a certain color of lemmings. Player 1 has blue shirts with green hair. Player 2 has green shirts with blue hair. Don't worry, you will mix them up. You can only control your lemmings. You cannot control the other lemmings. They come out of usually different entrances, but sometimes they alternate coming out of the same entrance. And your goal is to get as many lemmings as you can in your goal, but not in the opponent's goal. But your lemmings can go in his goal and give him points, but his lemmings can go in your goal and give you points.
This immediately sounds like a fucking disaster.
And sometimes the other guy will just send a bomber over and explode the bridge you just spent 2 minutes building. And it's ridiculous, and it's just complete insanity, but it is a ton of fun. So if you've got somebody with, a Super Nintendo and a couple controllers, throw some lemmings in there if you really want to hate each other for a while.
Yeah, it seems like a easy game to start shouting at each other.
Yeah, basically that.
let's talk reception.
Yeah.
Because people like this. I think next generation in 96 gave it the 8th greatest game of all time.
Yes.
Granted, they didn't know about Baldur's Gate 3 back in 1996.
Yeah, is,
so obviously it would be the 9th best game of all time when they consider it today. But how was Lemmings received?
Very well. It was received very, very well. Sold a ton of copies. Kotaku had, in a 2011 article, estimated the series sold about 20 million units, which by today's standards doesn't seem that much, but
no.
in 1992 was
for a puzzle
massive
game in 92 made by 11 people.
Right. Yeah. And like you mentioned, it was 8th best on Next Generation. There's a bunch of lists where it is ranks pretty high. You see a lot of European gaming magazines will give it really high reviews. CGW here in the US called it the 12th best game of all time back in 96.
Oh. Well, they knew about Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 and Icewind Dale.
This was 96. This was before Baldur's Gate 2.
Oh, shit. Oh, they knew about
Warcraft 1.
Warcraft 1 and the Gold Box games. That bumped it back to 12.
Yeah.
So,
but no, it was very well received, just universally praised at the time. Almost every port of it was also universally praised, with the possible exception of the NES version, which also limited you to 14 Lemmings. So it was a little rough.
Yeah. It's interesting to see it sliding down the scales. Next Generation, 1996, 8th best.
Yeah.
And then 2007, 82nd best by Edge magazine.
Well, there were some more games between 96 and 2007, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, no Baldur's Gate 3, but
right, yeah, not yet.
The rest of it is
now it's 88.
It's my joke of 2024 is everything must be compared to game of all time, Baldur's Gate 3. Second highest rated game on OpenCritic. Let's talk Legacy.
Yes.
Because there was a pretty sizable tail on this game before it died.
So yeah, they did release a bunch of level packs shortly after release. Some of them were just free that came with magazines or free at computer stores or whatever. But some of them were sold, most notably Oh No More Lemmings, which was a full-size expansion of, I want to say it's 100 levels.
It sounds to exist.
It's that's the hard version of the game is Oh No More Lemmings. It takes the difficulty and just ramps it way the fuck up.
Yeah.
DMA would also make 2 sequels to the game. Lemmings 2 The Tribes came out in 93, and then what we in the West, or we in North America anyway, called The Lemmings Chronicles. In Europe, it was called All New World of Lemmings. Came out in 94. That one was apparently a contractual obligation, according to the team at DMA.
No. That always leads to the best games, Saturn.
And neither of those were received quite as well, but they were generally positively received. Lemmings 2 The Tribes has some strong fans, and also The Tribes has 60 different jobs as opposed to the 8 in the main game.
Oh my god.
But you only get 8 of them per level.
Still, though, unless they each describe what they each do every time, I would totally forget shit.
Well, your lemmings are broken into different tribes, thus the name, and different tribes have different abilities.
Weird.
So as long as you're playing that tribe, you're always going to have those abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a neat little game. I've got the Genesis port of it. I did see an interview with Bob Fitch from Blizzard, where he said that Lemmings was a direct inspiration for the original Warcraft. And that Warcraft might not have existed in the form that it did had they not seen Lemmings first.
What an interesting lineage. Like, he must just looked at him and been like, it's cool to interact with lots of little dudes at once.
That's almost exactly what he said in the interview.
And give them little jobs and things.
He said that after seeing Lemmings, they thought about, what if we could have this, but with little tiny Vikings?
Yeah.
And that kind of led towards what eventually became Warcraft.
And now in 2023, I'm playing World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Here we are.
There is a sculpture of the Lemmings in bronze.
It's so cute.
It is in, I'm going to butcher this, Seabraids Park in Dundee, Scotland, which is
100% correct.
Which is, yeah, sure. It's close to where DMA Design was founded in Dundee, Scotland.
It's the cutest little, they got the little builder down there, and he's got little bricks, and the little climbers climb. It's cute. Although adorable. The one at the top has a butt on it. Like, there's junk in the trunk on that top lemming. Like, it is.
He's got it going on, man.
Stacked.
Yeah.
Stacks little lemming.
The following Psygnosis's purchase by Sony in '93, there were some future Lemmings games that were not developed by DMA Design, including 3D Lemmings, which sucks, don't play it. Lemmings Paintball, which is really fun but has nothing to do with Lemmings.
Yeah, why?
Lemmings Revolution, which is just the most mediocre nonsense ever. And The Adventures of Lomax.
Who the fuck is Lomax?
It's the mascot platformer starring a lemming.
Oh my god! Just call it Lemmings. Call it The Adventures of Lemmings.
No, it's Lomax. That's his name. He's the one lemming.
Lomax is like Lomax is the name of an American gladiator. Terrible name for a lemming.
But no, none of those were made by DMA Design, so I don't really consider them part of the series.
Yeah.
And then after the success of Lemmings, DMA obviously eventually wanted to do something that was not Lemmings. So they teamed up with the Nintendo to release what we in America know as Uniracers, though in Europe it's called Unirally.
Mm-hmm.
And after the success of that game, Nintendo signed them for 2 more games. One was called Kid Kirby, which was a mouse-based Kirby game for the Super NES that supposedly would have been similar to what is the rainbow one?
Canvas Curse.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So it would have been similar to that, but on Super Nintendo. And then also they were signed to make a game that they called Body Harvest. And neither of these were finished on time, so Nintendo canceled both of them.
I was about to say, I remember hearing about Body Harvest.
Well, it did release, but Nintendo didn't
come
publish
out?
it. Yeah,
Okay.
Midway ended up putting it out eventually.
Yeah.
Years after Nintendo canceled it, though. And then after their failed relationship with Nintendo, they went on to make a game called Grand Theft Auto.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
But anyway, back to good games. No, as this is not
they
good
did
games.
It 6 more times.
Yeah, they did keep releasing them. I don't think anybody from the original DMA Design is still there anymore, but most of them from the Lemmings team are still there for the first Grand Theft Auto.
Okay, yeah.
A
game which also involved lots of little dudes running around on the screen. You can see its DNA everywhere.
It's right there. And Sony did get together with Team 17, the Worms guys, to reboot Lemmings in 2006, which is funny because Team 17 in interviews has said that the original Worms was inspired by Lemmings and that they actually used placeholder graphics of Lemmings in their demo of it when they were developing the game.
Yeah.
So eventually they got to work on the series itself for PSP, PS2, and PS3, and they made a follow-up on Vita in 2014. I want to support Team 17 because they do a lot of great things, but man, those are some lifeless Lemmings games.
Yeah, the Vita one was that the touch one?
Yeah.
Lemmings Touch?
Yeah.
Oof.
They have no charm at all. Like the graphics are charming, I'll give it that.
Yeah.
But the music sucks. But other than that, Sony has basically forgotten that the series exists and has not done anything to make it available to modern audiences, so it is mostly forgotten.
Well, here's the Sony flowchart. It says at the top here, is it Spider-Man? And then it says, yes, publish it. And then it says, no, fuck you. So I don't know.
Oh, I didn't know God of War was Spider-Man.
Yeah, it is. It says
weird.
Spider-Man with beard and axe right here. So it's basically,
I'll do it. Yeah,
basically,
that's it.
And then it just says, Last of Us remake. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's about, but Lemmings is nowhere on this chart.
Weird.
As far as final thoughts, it's cute. It's a cute, fun game. If you've not played it, Neo Lemmings is free.
Yes.
And it runs great. And it's a fun little goofy puzzle game to goof off with for a little while.
And you can find the original level files from the original DOS version of the game and add them into Neo Lemmings and have the entire base game. And normally I would say that that's piracy, but Mike Daly of DMA Design used to host the entire DOS version for free on his website, which makes me think that the developers of the game are totally okay with that, even if Sony isn't.
I don't think Sony even fucking remembers that they own Lemmings.
Right.
So
I don't think they would notice.
who the hell knows?
So, but no,
being Sony, they probably care more about the Lomax copyright than they do like Lemmings proper. You'll get your PS5 third-person action Lomax video game Saturn. Don't you worry.
God, that game is so bad.
It's gonna have skill trees and crafting systems. and DLC. And if you pre-order at GameStop, you get like a little low fidelity Lomax costume where it looks like a 8-bit lemming.
I had no idea what the Adventures of Lomax was until one time when I was working at EB, somebody traded it in. This was probably like 04, 03 or 04. And so the game was already like 6 years old at this point. And I had like maybe seen the name, but had no idea what it was. And I'm looking at the cover after the guy left, and I'm like, that looks like a somebody trying to rip off Lemmings. Like, who wants to make an adventure game and rip off Lemmings? That's the dumbest art style. Then I look at the back of the box, and it says, based on the classic PC game Lemmings. I'm like, oh no, what did you do?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What is his ability? Blowing himself up? Like, what is his...
If I remember right, he can gain the different jobs from Lemmings and Lemmings 2 and then use those abilities.
Oh, God. All right. Whatever, Lomax. Jesus Christ. No low they won't sink to. And you know what low I won't hesitate to sink to is plugging our Patreon. At patreon.com/retro warriors, you can get great things like talking wizards and other shit if you want.
And our pre-show, which Andrew was on this week.
Andrew was on pre-show this week. That was a fun time.
Yeah.
Guy's out sick right now.
Aww.
He has what he has described as not COVID. So I don't know any other details than that, but we wish him
the uncovid
a swift recovery.
Indeed.
I was watching the new season of Futurama, and they did a COVID-19 episode, and it was the biggest laugh the series got for me, because they're like, finally in the year 3023 we have beaten COVID-19. And I was in my kitchen doing dishes like, ha. We want to thank the following patrons. They gave us money. We want to thank David Chevelle
and Amarlian.
Michael Castro.
I'm not giving my name to a machine.
Viable patron Metroid Prime.
Atari 2600 consultant Marlo 221.
Harry Pry.
Pablo, play every copyright owned music for 10 full seconds.
Mr. Jiggyfly.
And the half-minute hero.
Are all the patrons we want to thank for their kind donations. Those might have been funnier than Fart Butt from last week. Which was lowbrow but enjoyable. Yeah. Like a good cheap beer. Anyway, that's Lemmings. That's all that's ever existed for Lemmings. And
no, it's not.
All that ever will exist. And it's all of it. We did all of it.
We covered Lomax, so that's basically everything.
Every version, you are welcome. And now you can go into the world and you have facts about both the animal Lemmings and the video game Lemmings.
Now you can build little staircases.
Now you too. All right. We're going to be done. It's late. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.